So Alex, welcome to The Journey. So this is Alex Gary, and this is The Journey. And The Journey is primarily focused on stories of transformation, individuals who have maybe setbacks or had different obstacles in their life, and really trying to capture for individuals, how did they persevere through that? How did they be able to overcome those obstacles, but then more importantly, what were some of the lessons that they learned as they overcame those lessons? And you and I have known each other, actually probably known each other way back when.
Since the early 80s.
Early 80s, yeah, when we were in high school together.
Yeah.
So, but before we get started, I'm going to first ask you, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing right now, and then we'll kind of go backwards after that.
Well, yeah, that's kind of, the journey is like, continues all the time.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So for people would know me for 22 years. I was in journalism. 4 years up in Beloit, and then 17 with the Register Star, and then I was with the Register Star a year before that too. So, but then. That all ended in 2014, and I started trying a series of different things until I kind of formed my own company and was working with different companies, and then I just started working more and more with one single company.
Sure.
And you had me scheduled to come in a couple months ago, and I messaged you and said I just didn't feel like it was the right time.
Right.
Because that contract, it had taken me a while to build that up, and I was finally back to a point where I was making what I used to make at the newspaper.
Right.
And then that contract ended, like right at the end of April. So it was like, oh my God, here we go again.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So actually, though, having gone through it once, it's like anything. Having gone through something once, it's not nearly as scary the next time around.
Right.
And this time around, I had 4 years of doing lots of different things for lots of different people. Right. So I have a much more varied resume.
Sure. Right.
So actually, things are moving along pretty quickly, and I'm pretty confident that. I had a really good job interview last week. I've got another one this Wednesday. I've got proposals out to 4 different school districts on an alumni development idea, and I'm waiting on the biggest school district to decide what they want to do, either a staff position or a contract. So all of a sudden, actually for the first time in 10 years, I'm really kind of excited about where the road's going to take me.
Sure. Right. Okay.
Because for a long time, a lot of these last 10 years, it's kind of been, I felt trapped.
Yeah.
Like trapped in different jobs that weren't going anywhere, and so the journey is finally, I'm finally heading in a good direction.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, before we jump too far into different aspects of that, why don't you tell us a little bit about what does Alex love to do? When you have some downtime, what do you enjoy most doing?
Well, I hate sitting around.
Yeah.
So what I love to do is get outside. I mean, we grew up where at 8 in the morning you'd wake up and you'd either hop on your bike, or if you had your license by then, get in your car and you'd go play baseball in the morning or basketball or something, right? And then you'd come back at night at 8 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
I mean, your parents didn't care. It was a different time back then. I can't really physically do that anymore.
Sure. Yeah.
But like this weekend, I umpired for 12 hours yesterday.
Oh, wow.
That's a lot of fun. That's a good time. Saturday, I was out playing tennis with Matt Trowbridge, my old colleague. At night, one of the things they talk about is like limiting screen time, but that's weird for me because at night I'll get on and I'll work on my other side projects, which are a lot of history-based kind of things.
Sure. Yeah.
You're in it, and the person recording our podcast here is in it.
Sure.
But a few years ago, when I left the paper, I had been doing, even though I was never a sports writer for him, I'd been doing the sports research for him for like 17 years.
Okay.
So now I've got all this stuff.
Sure.
I don't know what to do with it.
Sure. Yeah.
Right? Matt Trowbridge kept using it and writing about it, which I thought was great, but it was my work. Right? So I kind of hit on creating a blog called the Nick 10 History Book.
Oh, sure.
And just posting all the all-conference teams, all the records on there. And that thing's got 280,000 page views now.
Wow.
And, so I created a Facebook page for it that's got 560 followers. I got a lot of, and because of that, a lot of good things else have happened because I've made $100 on it. Like, you know how blogs work. You put AdSense on
Sure,
it,
right.
enough people click on it. So I've made like $100 on it.
Yeah.
But because of that, I ended up getting 2 radio shows. So I do a radio show Saturday morning, and I do another one with Randy Roof every couple weeks. The Rockford School District hired me to do the Rockford Sports Coalition website, and it says $4,000 a year. Because of that led to the bigger opportunity on the alumni development, and Harlem had me to do like a research project. Plus, I've just met a lot of new friends. Like I'll run into somebody and they'll tell me their name, and I'll be like, "Were you a tennis player?" And they'll sit there and just their mind will be blown.
Yeah.
Football and basketball players are used to being remembered.
Yeah.
Tennis players aren't.
Right.
Cross country stars aren't. And so if you bring that up, now all of a sudden you've got like a 45-minute conversation on that. But that's been a lot of fun. And so a lot of the things I like to do is around research and and looking up things. I would have been a great historian, I think.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah. Now you graduated from Harlem, right? Grew up in this area, right? Your entire life. After high school, what'd you do immediately after high school? What happened?
So, it took me 3 colleges to get a degree. I went to Augustana to play baseball.
Okay.
But back then, the baseball stadium was where the Mississippi and the Rock River meet. So you would have to like pour a can of off spray on yourself every single day because the mosquitoes were so bad. So all of a sudden, I'm avoiding practice, right? So you can't. So I spent 1 trimester at Augustana, came back to play baseball at Rock Valley, and then ended up at NIU just because I just really didn't have a lot of direction back then. I just kept going to school out of habit.
Sure. Right.
And eventually I got myself a degree in political science, but at the last second, I remembered I'd liked to write, and I'd written for the Loves Park Post in high school.
Oh, yeah.
So then I went back and got a journalism minor in 1 semester. Okay. And so I didn't have a great resume coming out of college. I was really only into college because it was fun. Sure. I remember I got this letter one day. It said, "Your Pell Grant will expire at the end of the next semester." It's like, oh my God, I got to pay now.
I might start getting serious.
Sure. So my daughter, who's 20 now and worried that she doesn't have a great direction, I'm like, oh no, don't worry about it.
It's okay.
You'll figure it out in the end.
Well, it's interesting. You get a political science background, which obviously there's a part that has some history and some research element to that, and then you not only write well, but you enjoy writing. So those two go pretty well together, and so that can definitely get you farther.
Back then, I thought, well, what do you do with it? You either go become a lawyer, right, or go join the State Department. I didn't have the grades for either. Yeah. So journalism seemed like a better bet.
Sure.
And it was fun for a long time. The people I met along the way, I got to meet my childhood baseball heroes, Pete Rose and Johnny Bench. Then as I became a business writer, and I got on the editorial board, so I got to meet Barack Obama before when he was running for Senate.
Okay.
And that's always a great story. He hadn't blown up yet.
Sure. Yeah.
He was a long shot, so I got to spend an hour with him.
Okay.
And he didn't come off as a politician. He came off as like a college professor. It was a lot of fun to talk to.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about that.
So he was one of 8 candidates for Senate.
Okay. And this was what year do you think?
So this would be 2002, I think. Right.
Okay.
Let me think here, or 2000. But anyway, he was nobody at that time, and he'd already been to Rockford once, and Wally Haas and Chuck Sweeney met with him. So he was making another swing back through, along 90. So he stopped in again. So Wally Haas comes down and says, "Hey, there's this candidate in for the Senate, Barack Obama, and Chuck and I've already met with him. So can you come and sit in with him so we have at least a third person, somebody he hasn't met?" So yes, I sat down with him for an hour, and he just talked about education in Chicago and how we can fix it.
Okay.
So afterward, Wally said, "What do you think?" I said, "Well, he's way too smart to be a politician." Right? I'd met Rod Blagojevich, who was, about as intelligent. He just had the nice looking hair.
Sure.
So that was fun. As he blew up, that was a lot of fun.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
Well, if you remember back to, and maybe you don't remember, but if you do remember, what did he think at that time he wanted to do with education, and now that time is either has or
Okay, so what was interesting was he said you cannot fix education in Chicago until you fix the culture of education in Chicago. Because in Chicago public schools, if an African American boy is caught, at the time, is caught walking around with books in their hands, right? Other African American boys would come and knock them out of their hands and say, "Quit acting white." You know, this is what I'm talking about with Barack Obama. That's the quote I remember him talking, and we just spent the rest of the hour talking about how do you fix that? Because unless you increase education in poorer communities, it's just never going to get better.
Right.
And so, we didn't talk about politics.
Sure.
We didn't talk about it. We talked a little basketball because he's a big basketball fan. But that's what I remember about that hour.
Yeah, interesting. Well, and it's interesting that, I mean, he actually was talking about the problem. I mean, that is in the essence of the core problem at that time. And how many times, do we have conversations like that? We're not talking really about the problem. We're just skimming things.
I was used to basically sitting down politicians and getting the canned talking points.
Right.
They're going to talk about a certain thing, and they've got a message to deliver. Blagojevich was great for that. Local politicians are the same way. And just to sit down and have like an honest conversation with somebody, was great.
And there was no doubt all through his candidacy for presidency and then through his presidency, I mean, that was one of his strongest points was his ability to articulate and communicate. So interesting. So thinking about that as you're going with as a reporter, other individuals that stand out to you that you had an opportunity to meet while you were working for either up in Beloit or at the Register-Star, anybody else stand out to you like that?
Well, funny story is my all-time hero baseball player turned his back on me. That was funny. So, we used Beloit to go to sporting events, right? That's the nice thing about being a sports writer. You get to go to free stuff. I actually got to go to Game 5. We can zoom way forward. I now freelance for the newspaper because the paper's gotten smaller and smaller. Yeah. So for Game 5 of the Raptors-Bucks playoff series, I got a media pass to go up there to watch Fred VanVleet play. Sure. But no, a long time ago, I remember I wanted to go see the Reds play the Brewers. Although I was born here, I did live 5 years in Cincinnati, so I became a big Cincinnati Reds fan. So I actually went during the year the baseball was going to go on strike, 1994. And so I used that as a reason to go into the Reds locker room and ask Barry Larkin, my favorite player, a question. And apparently he'd been asked it over and over and over again.
Same question.
About the strike stuff. So he said, so he basically declined to comment, and he turned his back on me. I was like, oh man, I wanted to explain to him that is just a reason to meet you.
Yeah.
Right?
Really.
But the funny part is, as I'm walking away, Deion Sanders, said, that's a good question, man. So I got to meet Deion Sanders.
There you go.
Perfect. That's crazy stuff.
Well, speaking of Fred, right? So tonight is at the night when we're taping this. This will be Game 5. Game 5 of the NBA championship, and the Raptors are up 3-1. And Fred's having a great series. He had a great, the last series was great too. What and you had mentioned you had interviewed him a handful, and you've known him. Caleb played. They were back in the same type of sports league and stuff like that when they were younger. But what is, for the people that don't know Fred as a person, they've seen him on TV, they hear about him all the time, and what's Fred like? I personally have never met him, so I don't know.
He's very soft-spoken, and he chooses his words carefully.
Okay.
That's what I've always remembered about him.
Okay.
I first talked to him back between his junior and senior year when I was still at the newspaper as a business writer, and I went down to the sports editor and I said, is he the best point guard we've ever had? And I said, I'd like to do a story on that. And back then, whenever I could sneak off out of business and do something sports related, whatever. But so I ended up talking to a ton of people, and that's the first time I met him, and learned. And there were tons of good stories about him coming up. Since then, I've gotten to speak with him a handful of other times. Like when we see each other, it's a first name basis, which is kind of cool.
Sure.
So he remembers people. Yeah. He's just got his head on straight.
He seems like a very hardworking guy.
Well, to me, he's like the reverse basketball unicorn. They call Giannis because I can't do his last name, a unicorn, right? Because he's 7 feet, but he moves like somebody who's 6'3", right? But if you're 7 feet and you have that kind of athleticism, you probably should be in the NBA. Yeah. They did a stat one time. If you're 7 feet tall, 18% of people are 7 feet tall playing in the NBA, right? You have a natural advantage. Fred is 6 foot tall. Maybe. He says he's 6'1", but I have a picture of him and I standing together, and I'm 5'11" and a half, and he's maybe a so anyway, 6 foot tall. So there's very few of those in the NBA. As far as I know, he doesn't have a recorded dunk, either at Wichita State or in the NBA, right? I think he's the only player in the NBA who doesn't have a dunk, right? And then I've played at people at the Y who are faster than him or quicker. Mm-hmm. Right, so he's an outstanding athlete, but I've met lots of people who are better athletes, and yet he's in the NBA, and they're all still at the Y.
Yeah. So what do you think?
Well, it's his work ethic and his just knowledge of the game, and to me, he's almost more of a unicorn. Because the NBA and the NFL are the sports of physical freaks.
Yeah.
There's baseball you'll find 5'6", 5'7" guys, but in the NBA and the NFL, usually these are people who are just naturally been gifted by God with some natural size or strength or speed.
Sure.
And Fred's got some of that, but like I said, you right now you can go down to the Y right now and you'll find 2 or 3 people who have more physical gifts than Fred. Sure. And yet he's in the NBA and they're not. And so to me, and for Rockford, that's an even better story.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's not like he's some 6'10" guy that should have played in the NBA. He's some guy that you can find on the bike path, but he worked himself up to being one of the 35 best basketball players in the world, probably.
Right. It's interesting. When you were just saying that, I remember watching. I don't know if it's on Netflix or YouTube or wherever I saw it, was a documentary called The Brady Six, and it talks about Tom Brady being six. Either there was 5 quarterbacks drafted before him the year he was drafted, or there were 6 before him. Whichever it was, he was the last quarterback drafted in the NFL that year of those starters. And he is what he is. And
right. And a lot of guys, you read that story all the time. These guys have that chip on their shoulder. Yeah. Who's the little Darren Sproles, little running back for who's still in the league. Yeah. Him and Frank Gore. Yeah. They're 36 years old, and they outlast like 25 other running backs taken, and they can name all those people. There were 60 basketball players drafted the year Fred VanVleet was available to be drafted, and he was not. But if you go back and look at the stats, he's the 8th best player from that class.
Interesting. Now he wasn't drafted, and then he walked on with Toronto, or how did that work?
If you're not drafted, you're a free agent. So Toronto called him minutes after the draft were over, said they were aggressive and said, we think you can make our team, and we'd like you to sign. So in a way, it was a good thing for him, because he had been drafted by a team that didn't really see anything in him or have a spot for him, they would have cut him.
Sure.
But instead, Toronto signed him to a contract, put him in the G League, and he was allowed to work his way up.
Interesting. Well, and I remember watching him when he was at Wichita State, and just it seemed very much like that. Just the work ethic piece of it, and he very much seemed like. And again, I don't know much about basketball, but it seemed like he was aware of what was going on the court all the time.
Yeah. We had a really good run of athletes from that age level. Dean Lowry's in the NFL. Yeah. I think they played football together as kids. Yeah. That's probably a pretty good team. Yeah. Right? And then Jake Smolinski was, I think, a couple years older.
He was a couple years older.
But he's made the major leagues in baseball. And then there was Brad Benjamin, the golfer, same era, who ended up playing professional golf. It's like we had this golden era of athletes, and then we had that big recession. Yeah. And we really, we lost a lot of families that might have produced that next generation of great athletes.
Because he graduated.
They're all around. Well, Fred's around 2012.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, because my son graduated in 2014, and there were some good athletes that year as well, but not. There was less that went to that next level. Yeah, that next level of play and stuff like that. So. But I think, it's interesting having all those years coached. I went back to Harlem and coached, and one of the things that is not only as a football coach, but then also as a strength conditioning coach, it's always great to have a natural athlete, come up and you can work with them, but who we would rather have was that individual that may not have necessarily been that natural athlete, but that one that was hungry and was coachable and was willing to work. Not just on the field or on the mat or wherever it was, but then off too. Being able, obviously being eligible was huge.
Yeah.
But also being able to just study the sport, study and really understand the other aspects of it instead of just relying on their talent. And I think sometimes we would have athletes that were so gifted naturally that they never really understood the game because they didn't have to at the younger levels, and they got into bad habits of just of getting away with their talent, and then you get sent to this camp and this club and different things like that, and all it does is reinforce bad habits, and they don't necessarily get have the benefit of being hungry.
Well, so one of the things that I think Fred's been great at, and I've been thinking about that a lot lately. So all basketball players are like NASCAR now. Everybody has their own brand, right? Right. Even the basketball coach at Toronto, when he came out for the interview afterward, he had a cap and he had logoed his name, Nick Nurse, right? Anyway, so Fred's thing is he has this clothing line called Bet on Yourself. Okay. Right? And so there's a storefront downtown in Rockford, so you can go down and buy it at all times. It's available online. But that's his thing, is bet on yourself. When he came out of Wichita State, there was standing offers. He could have gone to Europe and made a ton of money. But he wanted to play in the NBA, and which would mean a lesser contract. But he wanted to bet on himself. And so, in my situation now, over the last 3 months, I'm like, okay, do I rush out and just take whatever job's available? Right. Or do I finally, since I think I have an idea of something I can do long-term that more suits my talents and interests, really, do I just be picky and wait, so you sit there and you calculate, how much money do you have, how long can it last, and stuff like that. And so I've thought about Fred a lot, because I'm trying to, at this point in my life, I'm trying to bet on myself, and not just go take whatever job, and because I think at this point in my life, I don't want to be stuck in an office reporting to somebody. I want to, have the freedom to develop my own thing and build it.
Well, we'll come back to that, but because I think that's I think it's a great point about this idea of betting on yourself, and just so people have a little bit of idea and understand, because I think so many times people, especially younger listeners, and I've had some feedback from younger listeners that they want to hear where you came from as well, because there's sometimes this impression that everyone just arrived.
Yeah, they're 25 and
and we in both our cases that wasn't the case. That wasn't the case. We didn't just arrive. And so you get involved with a newspaper, and you've had to over time recreate yourself. And we've talked before on the show that about this idea of the hero's journey, about there's this sense of order, and then something happens, and whatever that order is also part of the story. But then something happens, or you stayed too long, or whatever it may be, and now there's disorder, now there's chaos, and then through that you have to find out things about yourself that maybe you were ignoring, maybe you were shying away from, maybe there's some insecurities that were popping up that kept you in that order before, and maybe even kept you to stay there too long.
Well, I just turned 50, and I shot a little video of myself on my 50th birthday, just because to me it wasn't so much I was turning 50, it was getting out of my 40s. Okay. Because my 40s were just a long slog. If I look back at it, 2007, pretty much everything was about right. So I was assistant business editor. The paper was huge. You know, the recession or the technology hadn't killed in journalism yet. So I had 4 people working under me, and all great people. I had one person who worked in, they called them editorial assistants, but basically 20 hours a week worked with me. I'd built like a nationally recognized data team because I just like to find numbers, and so that's going well, right? I'm living in a house in Loves Park, which I love. Married, 2 kids. Just everything's perfect, right? And then 2008, and I'll still never know exactly why, but I've done a lot of reading. All of a sudden, 2008, things changed between me and my ex-wife. Just did, like from December to January. Just was like the new year. Something in her brain changed, and it never got better.
Was she the same? Or same age? I mean,
she's 2 years younger than me.
So you would have been 40 at that time.
Yeah, but she was approaching that 40th level. Which, when you do a lot of the research, marriages have 2 danger spots: years 1 through 4, and oops. Shouldn't have done it, right? And years 10 through 14. Okay. And years 10 through 14 are getting close to 40. Kids are in school, so you're not needed to work together as much, right? Maybe your house doesn't want it, and 2/3 of divorces are filed by women, and nothing to do with abuse or anything like that. It's just grass is greener theory. You kind of hit 40 and you start reevaluating your life.
Sure.
I don't know if that's it or not, but all of a sudden in 2008 everything kind of changed.
Okay.
And so the last year and a half we were together was really tense because I kept trying different things to figure out how to get it back, and I did the reading after, and I probably should have gone the other direction. I should have backed like way off.
Sure. But we freak out, right? Because we think we're going to lose something that we've wanted and we think is good, and so, the natural tendency is to move farther into it. Yeah. But reality is, if you would,
they should just backed off and let her figure out on her own.
Yeah. But that's what fear does to us.
Yes, and a lot, we'll get back to that. So, because he's trying to set the stage, and then of course, 2008, the newspaper industry just we get a note, no more raises. They take away our 401k, and all of a sudden we start losing people. We had a layoff in 2010, 11, 12, and I survived a lot of those layoffs. But all of a sudden now my career is, I only know how to do one thing at that point, and I was on this arc of up, and up. Every once in a while I'll just sit down and do the math. If I kept getting my 3% raises forever, I'd be making $85,000 a year. Sure. Not worried about anything. Anyway, so in 2009, Mother's Day of 2009, we split up. That's why I do hate Mother's Day. I will say, I think I put that out there. My mom's been gone for a long time, so I don't have anybody to celebrate, right? And we split up on Mother's Day, so I hate Mother's Day. So, I'm going through a divorce at the same time the newspaper industry is falling apart. So, I turned 40 right before we split up, and so 40 to 49, it's just been, a continual, how am I going to make this work? Sure. Kind of thing.
And you have 2 girls, and your oldest has done a lot of musicals and performances with my daughter. But and Emma's how old now?
She's 20. 20,
and then your youngest
is 16.
16. Okay.
So, and that's a lot of what goes. A lot of what happened in my 40s was just basically trying to maintain my influence and time with them. Yeah. In 2000, so first of all, I fought hard to get as much time with them as possible. Sure. Yeah. Didn't get exactly 50-50, but oh well. I got quite a bit. I spent a lot more time with my daughters than a lot of divorced men get to. I've heard a lot of those sob stories. So that was always my number one priority, was maintaining my relationship with them. So in 2014, when the newspaper finally got around to letting me go, I got, I got job offers, or at least not offers, but saying, hey, we are looking for somebody. We think you'd be great, from Nebraska, Florida, Indianapolis, Arizona, Cincinnati, which is would have been, when I got into journalism, my dream job was eventually end up in Cincinnati. I actually had met somebody in journalism, and he emailed me and said, I heard the Register Star let you go. We need a business writer in Cincinnati, and I turned it down.
Because
it's 5.5 hours away from my daughters.
Yeah, it's not a go.
And I was going to raise my daughters.
Yeah.
Not some other guy.
Yeah. Well, and to miss out on those experiences is just to me, is unheard of. It's just not an option.
But you hear about it all the time. I have a friend who lives in Madison. His kids live in Byron, and it hurt his relationship with them. But his best job offer was Byron during the recession. I don't know, it was Madison during the recession.
I just know for me, it was real important. I wanted to experience. I agree. I wanted to be part of their lives, and I wanted to influence them. All those things, but I wanted to experience. Those experiences. I wanted to see them. I wanted to experience those time periods when they were growing up.
Yeah,
and still do. So yeah.
So then, 2014 and 15. And a little bit of 16 was the darkest time. Really, really, especially. So 2014, September 2014, the newspaper finally lets me go. I'm still, I'm not mad about it. They probably should let me go a year earlier, because once they stopped giving raises every year, that means you're making less money when you factor in inflation and things like that. So I became very entrepreneurial. I started working all these different side jobs. So, and I always forget some of them. I've worked over 35 running races for Lakeshore Athletic Services, where you drive in every weekend and put up tents and barricades.
Oh yeah, wow.
Yeah. I mean, really physical work. I've been the lead scorekeeper for Jefferson basketball for 10 years. I now do Rock Valley stats. I umpire now. That replaced Lakeshore Athletic Services. One winter, I worked the UPS night shift.
That's a rough job.
That was when I would leave the newspaper. This would be a Friday. This would be a typical Friday. I would leave the Register Star at 5. If I didn't have my daughters that weekend, I would then go to Jefferson to do a basketball game from 5:30 to 9:30. I'd go back to the Register Star, sleep in a chair downstairs for an hour and a half till I checked in at UPS, and then work till 3 in the morning. That was my weekends for 8 weeks, because I was trying to make enough money to buy my daughter a MacBook, which those are expensive.
Yeah.
So, just all these different things that I've done over the years. Gosh, I know I donated plasma for 5 years. I still got the little bump on the arm. It hasn't totally gone away, because I didn't want to forget that one. Just little side jobs here and there. But what that meant for the paper was I was salary, and they, everybody was on salary. They just kept working more and more, 60 hours, 80 hours. I told them, I'm going to work my 37.5. Because if I work 50 hours or 2, you pay me the same amount.
Right.
But if I work 50 hours here and I don't umpire, then I'm out $80.
Yeah.
Right. And I need that $80.
Yeah.
So in the end, they let me go in 2014. Because they just needed, dwindling staff. And I left, they had 115 people. They're under 90 now. It's just continued to get small.
Yeah.
But so now all of a sudden, I've been doing that for 25 years, off and on, different things. What are you going to do? I had lots of people in the community who were interested in me. But I kept losing out to people who had experience. I was always I was everybody's second choice. Oh, we think you'd be great at this job, but this person's been in the actual banking industry for 20 years. Yeah, okay, I lose. I tried financial services for a year. That was fun. I got my Series 7. I could sell you stocks, bonds, mutual funds, but that's really just a sales job. Anybody in this town who has money has a financial advisor. So their whole training was, how do I convince you that me, who just got a Series 7, is smarter than that guy? And that's just not me. That's not honest.
Sure.
Right? And coming out of journalism, I just couldn't. I can have a conversation with you all day about money, but I can't in the end ask you for $100,000. I just can't do it.
Yeah.
It's not me.
Yeah.
So that one didn't work. That's when I started doing more and more work for this company downtown, thanks to a person who's become a really good friend of mine, named Rob Davis. And that's how I kind of reestablished myself. I was writing blog copy. I was doing media placement, just little things that I picked up from the newspaper that, okay, my skills could work in this atmosphere. And then in the end, it comes down to I'm better actually at meeting people, right? That was probably my number one success for that company, was just getting that company known in the community through my past contacts and new contacts, because I do like getting out and just talking to people. Part of it, when you ask questions for 25 years, you meet somebody new, you're just kind of curious, what do they do? And
exactly.
You ask questions, build the relationship.
Yeah. And so, and I know that there was a lot of things that during that year plus that you were at that company, there's a lot of good things that came out of that, and a lot of new opportunities and things that they did with their business and stuff like that. So,
well, let's take a step back though. For what you do and what you do with Shatter Our Silence, the darkest time would have been, the toughest time for me was, I had talked to Jeff Fahrenwald about trying to get in at United Technologies, which I think has changed its name twice since then.
Oh yeah, it has.
And they had a program, very smart program, that Jeff Fahrenwald had set up. They were only hiring non-engineers or non-line workers if you were getting your MBA through Rockford University. So I had started getting my MBA earlier, so I re-upped, took some more classes, and then started interviewing with United Technologies. And I got hired either on June 23rd or June 24th, I believe it was 2015. And it was great. And now, because that's going to pay me $50-some thousand a year, I can finish my MBA. When my MBA is done, then usually United Technologies just bumps you right up into the 70s, and I'm back to where I need to be.
Right.
So I was supposed to go in and fill out my paperwork the next week, but the lady who I was going to do it with went on vacation. She emails me. She goes, "I'm going to be on vacation until July 3rd or something like that. So we just have you come in the week after." Fine, no problem. Then on July 1st, I'm at my class at Rockford University, and there's a buzz in the class. And I asked, "What's going on?" I said, "Did you hear United Technologies went through a hiring freeze?" Nope, I didn't hear that at all. So I emailed Fahrenwald. I said, "So United Technologies is on a hiring freeze. Does that affect me?" He goes, "Nope, if you're already in the company, you're good." And so I thought it was good. But then I emailed the lady when she got back, and she's like, "No, since we didn't do your paperwork." Hired on June 23rd, didn't do the paperwork because she went on vacation. I'm out. I'm not hired. I'm not part of the company. And so now and I had quit my financial services job, which I hated, but at least they were paying me. Right? Now I've quit, and you can't get unemployment when you quit. Right? So my unemployment's gone. I'm on a hiring freeze, and it's summer. Right? What am I going to do with myself? And that was the hardest time. I went on food stamps. My only income was umpiring. That was a rough 3 months. I wiped out what was left of my 401k from the paper. The girls are over a lot, and this is a difference in perception, right? Versus my perception is, I'm falling apart. I've got no direction in life. I've got no money. I'm on food stamps, right? Yeah. My youngest daughter's perception was that was a really fun summer, because I was there every day, not going to work.
Sure.
So we were riding bikes and taking walks and things like that. Okay. She actually really thinks that is a great summer.
That's the highlight summer for her.
And I'm just like, that was easily the toughest summer of my life.
Yeah.
I had started doing some work for that company, but it hadn't become steady yet. I ended up mid-July getting a job as a home inspector for banks. Houses going into foreclosure.
Sure. Yeah.
That at least just filled my time. I only made like $1,200 a month, and I was in the car a lot. But at least I had something to do.
Right.
So that was the hardest part. That was when the dark thoughts kind of hit you. I even thought about why am I still here? Right. In the end, the only reason I didn't act on any of that stuff was, again, nobody else is going to raise my daughters. If I'm not there, then they've got different influences in their life. So that was the roughest summer.
It's interesting when you talk about, the same reason that you didn't go to Cincinnati, the same reason you didn't go and take those other job offers was that you wanted to be in your daughter's life.
Right, and they weren't going to be able to come with me. I would have taken the Cincinnati job in a second if they came with me.
Right, and for multitude of reasons why that was going to be.
Well, when you're not, there's when you're not together, when parents aren't together,
Yep.
You can't have that united front,
right?
Which is a big deal.
Yeah.
And my parents were divorced, so I was easily able to play them off on each other. So I knew how that works.
Sure. How old were you when they divorced your parents?
13.
Okay.
Yeah, and in life there's two different childhoods.
Yeah.
There's the childhood when they're together, and there's childhood when they're not.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And it's the same for both of them. My daughter the youngest was 6, and the eldest was 9 when we split up. And it's different. It's interesting how they've developed differently because of that.
Yeah.
The oldest one, since we were together longer, we got her in the theater. We limited her screen time. There was always somebody there to watch her and help her. And so she did a lot of she did a lot of plays, and she's been more active. The younger one. So when we split up, now all of a sudden I've got to work 5 or 6 jobs and pay for child support and things like that. And then her mom's a single mom for a while. So TV and the phone becomes your babysitter.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. So she got a lot more free time and a lot less structured time.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. And so she never got into any kind of organized activities. I'm not saying it's bad. She's got tremendous drawing and writing skills, but she's much more introverted than the older one. It's just interesting to watch how they develop differently because their circumstances changed.
Yeah. And I think I agree with you. There is an element where obviously it's doable, right? A single parent can raise kids.
Well, you just wake up every day and make the best of it.
Yeah, you just figure it out the best you can. But ideally, right? It's always easier and a better product if you have a partner.
And the one is, I felt for a long time up until just the last year that I couldn't have rules. Because if you have rules and the kids don't like the rules, they just say, I'm going to go back to mom's. Right? So you can't set some standards and boundaries that you can when it's 2 of you together.
Sure.
Right? Because there's an option.
Yeah.
And you don't want them to use that option. Right? And they know it.
Well, and there's that element, then you don't feel like you have any leverage, natural leverage. But you said that in the past year, you've come to realize that maybe you can have some expectations?
Well, the older one, it gets to a point where in her life, she's having relationships and things like that, and disappointments, right? Everybody's a shiny new car when they're a kid,
Sure.
And then as life goes on, you start getting dings and dents and things like that, and then that makes you think about things differently. I look back at my dad now a lot differently, having gone through a divorce, and admire him a lot more than I did. I spent a lot more time with my mom, and so I adopted my mom's viewpoint on things. Sure. And now having gone through a divorce, and there's 2 sides to a divorce. There's the walk-away spouse, and there's the left-behind spouse. And that this woman out of Woodstock who has a divorce recovery site kind of termed that, right? Yeah. And they see things way differently. The walk-away spouse, just adjust things, whatever, right? It's just a new journey, new path, right? The left-behind spouse whose life's been shattered, who tried to, save it. That's easy for you to say, right? And so, now, yes, I look back on how my dad handled things, and how my mom treated my dad a lot differently. In the last year and a half, I think my oldest daughter has kind of seen how I handled things, and she gets it a little bit better now.
Sure.
So, and then you get to be 20. The late teens are tough for any parent. Oh, right.
Well, and especially in your case, or not just in your case, but when you are in that situation where the mom and dad are not together, and you want to be able, you have concerns about their choices or what choices they're not making, but then you also don't feel like how do I intervene? I'm not, and then still hanging on to that idea that instead of it being the quality time that I do have with them, I'm still grieving over the lack of quantity time that I've always wanted with them.
You talk about fear, and one of the things that I read and learned, to me, and correct me if you think I'm wrong, anger dates back to you're scared of something. When you lose it and really get mad about something, it's because, in my case, it dates back to something I'm afraid of.
Sure, that's the initial impression.
And at some point I've lost the ability to deal with it in the moment, and so that I just lose my temper.
Right.
And so when it comes back to, like with me, growing up, bounced around a lot as a kid, I always worried. I dated later in life. I didn't have the nice hair, and and stuff. So it always felt like all my friends were going out with cheerleaders, and as a basketball player, and all my friends were dating all the cheerleaders, and I wasn't.
Sure.
So I just had this fear, like, what's wrong with me?
Right.
Like I'm going to end up alone.
Right.
And so after the split up and the divorce, that fear totally comes back.
Yeah.
Right. Because when you get married, you're like, oh my God, somebody actually wants to spend the rest of your life with you.
Right.
You're like, so if you're
I've been chosen.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then when that stops,
Yep.
so now you're that
rejection comes
you're
back.
that 13-year-old who
who wasn't good enough.
Right.
I think you said second best.
Yeah, second best. And so all of a sudden that fear comes back. And so then now that person's dating somebody else.
Yeah.
Right? And now your daughters are spending 60% of their time living with some other guy. Right? And so now that fear comes, creeps back in. So all the times I think I've blown up at my daughters, it came down to the fear of my ex-wife's right. I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy. Right? She's better off. That's that kind of stuff. That's where that fear comes from.
Yeah.
And it's learning to overcome that or let it go.
Yeah.
And at some point you get to a point where you've been through it enough, and you recognize the signs.
Yeah.
And why are you getting mad?
Yeah.
Okay. Right? And you can catch yourself.
Yeah.
So that's part of it. I'm not. So the 20-year-old and I getting along a lot better now isn't because all of a sudden she's 20 and she's a lot better.
Yeah.
Right? It's also because part of it's because she's 20 and she's a lot better.
Exactly. Yeah.
But part of it is I'm 50 and I'm letting some stuff go.
Right. Well, and I think there is that element that we have to own our part of it, right? And if our part of something's happening, she's doing something, you feel like you're out of control. If that goes back to that fear, and that fear that somehow this is an example of me not being good enough, or I'm going to lose more control, or my life's getting, or whatever it may be, like you said, that fear ends up being the underpinning and the driving of a lot.
Yeah. Another thing I was going to Heartland a lot. I'm not super religious, but I do like Heartland. I always say, if you just take the Jesus part out of it, the Bible's just really a how-to live book, right? Whatever. But and they had a series Andy Stanley did out of Georgia. It's called Living in the Land of Ur.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of that?
I know Andy Stanley's work.
Well, okay, so if you look at it, people in America are all the top 1%.
Sure.
We're just much richer than the rest of the world. But my neighbor might have a better house. A newer car, prettier wife, smarter kid, right? Better job. Yeah. So we're always, even if we're not doing, even if we're doing really well, somebody else is doing better.
Sure.
And so now we got to chase that person.
Yeah.
Right? And then once you catch that person, that's great. But now you got to chase the next person on your block. And so I would listen to that over and over again, because I think I've always thought that not being satisfied was one of my strengths. So I would get a job and I was like, this is not perfect for me. And I'd tweak it until I thought it was like the perfect job, instead of just being satisfied with it.
Right.
And maybe that comes from sports. You're always trying to get a little bit better.
Well, I definitely think there's an element regarding performance when it comes to sports, but I think also that's the positive part, right? But then the wound part also may come back from what you had talked about originally. Not just you, but many of us, is that if we have an initial wound that happens early on in our life, for whatever reasons, we assess, something happens with parents, or something happens with the parents with us, or whatever, and we don't think we're matching up then we're constantly going to be struggling with this idea of being content with wherever we're at, because either one, it's going to get taken from us, or two, maybe it's not as good as the next Mr. Jones or Mrs. Jones or her piece, right? So,
and it was a struggle for parenting too, because I would continue to push right? Because you're supposed to, right? Aren't you supposed to help your kids be as good as possible? And so it can do your homework, do this, do that. If you do this, you can get to there.
Yeah.
But how much of that is helping them versus your friends' kids are on the honor roll, or your friends' kids are great athletes, and you want yours to be better.
Yeah, and that's a crazy part that ends up happening. And I think a lot of parents fall into that temptation of their identity now is a result of their child's performance or however their child is, and there's that temptation to then push or to. They were talking. I can't remember. There's a new term that I had not heard before. That you got the helicopter mom, right, and the helicopter dad or whatever, and then I know what it was, the lawnmower parent.
Okay.
And I do, what's a lawnmower parent? And that's the one who paves the way to make sure that their child has success.
Yeah.
So they get everything out of the way. They're literally in the jungle cutting things down so that the child doesn't have any struggles as they're navigating through the jungle.
Which in the end, so then at some point in that kid's life, they're going to wonder if they were a success or they just followed the path that was laid out for them.
And so they find out right that the path that's been carved for them was someone else's doing, or the wound may be my parents didn't believe that I could carve out my own path.
Yeah.
And so what parents, they don't mean harm. I don't think they're really meaning harm. They're just they're overcompensating for something in this way, and it ends up having a detriment for their kids. We have tons of kids right now for a variety of different reasons that higher levels of anxiety and depression than we've ever seen before. Now maybe it's because we're doing a better job of what is anxiety depression, and kids are more willing to talk about it. Maybe that's it. But I also think there's other things that kids aren't playing from 8 o'clock in the morning until 8 o'clock at night outside and figuring out how to play and do different things like that. It's much more, it's maybe too directed, and so there's some concerns about.
And it's too easy to compare. I mean, we didn't have Facebook growing up.
Oh yeah.
We only knew what our immediate group is doing, right? And now, that living in the land of if you're age 19, 20, 21, and all the friends you went to high school with are at this great college or that great college, or have this great job, or the lead of this, the lead of that. That's what because that's all they're posting on their Facebook. They're not posting the bad. Very few people post the bad stuff. They post the great stuff. So if you're kind of lost or not sure of yourself, and you go on Facebook and you're like, oh, she's at Loyola, look how great she's doing, and I'm here, right? It's living in the land of exploding because you can now compare yourself with even more people. It used to be you're just competing with people on your block. Now you're competing with that person you played basketball against in high school who, oh my God, he's a lawyer. Where does he live? I was a journalist and my career fell apart.
Well, and I definitely think that is a big element of what's happening today. There's great things about technology, great things about where our advances have been from that element and with social media, and those are all beneficial things. But there's also a negative side, and part of this show is all about specifically listening to individual stories of people who have had
turn that off.
had struggles, right? So we talk about this idea of in your case, right? The order was, you were working at the newspaper, everything was going great. You were married, you had 2 children, you probably had 1.5 dogs, the white picket fence and all that, and that order you got thrust out of that, and you got thrown into this chaos and this disorder, right? And now a couple things. Now, one of the same things that caused you not to move right to Cincinnati was wanting to be in your daughter's life, but they also ended up being a protective factor, so that when you were in those darkest places, they were this like a beacon of light that no matter how bad it is, I have to stay. not only stay and not leave and move to Cincinnati or wherever, but I can't get succumbed by this darkness.
Yeah.
Because I don't want someone else raising my kids. I don't want to miss out on this experience. And that protective factor is what helps people, even though it may at times feel like it's an obligation, but it's what grounds us to go, yeah, I know that I'm in this extreme amount of pain, and I don't think I'm ever going to get out of it, but I'm going to have to figure out a way to dig myself out. And I think that's a huge piece, and it's huge for us to be able to identify what those things are. For some people, it's a pet. For another person, it may be an element of not their job, but of something greater than themselves, that maybe they call it a career, or or it's children or family or whatever it may be. I want to, as we slip into of the lessons that you learned in that darkness, right, of the things that you learned, it's then where we then move into what we call reorder, or we bring what we've learned in the darkness, we bring back home, metaphorically. What do you think for you, from what you learned from being in those dark places, newspaper, divorce, can't find where you fit in, what have you learned about Alex that maybe previously you thought was true that isn't now?
So, in the end, every day you just got to wake up and figure it out. And so what I've learned is that I enjoy almost the entrepreneurship side of things.
Okay.
I've been really creative in when one door closes, another one opens. And when you're working for the same company for 17 years, and you're just making year by year, and just trying to climb the ladder, and you don't imagine life outside of it. Life outside is scary.
Right.
So I think back to my daughters, the lessons that maybe I'm hoping they get from this 10 years of wandering around and trying to figure things out, is that there's just lots of different ways to live and make money. There's not just one way. So their mom has worked at the same job. I got her that job back when she was 25, and she's been there. She's been there almost 25 years now, and as without a college degree, she makes probably over $80,000.
Wow.
So they've lived with that person who goes up every day, goes to the same job, puts up with all the stuff better than I could have. And we'll get the gold watch.
Yeah.
Insurance industry for the most part is pretty solid, and she's going to get the gold watch when she retires. On the flip side, the person who actually went to college has bounced from job to job to job in the last 10 years, and just again trying to figure it out. And some years were better than others, but now after those 10, now we're finally to the point where I think I've figured out what my talents really could benefit an organization.
Right.
And it's taken me maybe longer than it should have, but I'm hoping that what they've learned is that as long as you don't give up and you get out there, you don't just curl up in a ball and hide yourself in your house. If you just get out there and meet people and talk to people, the other opportunities just happen.
Yeah.
Right? If you just get out there and talk to people, opportunities happen.
Yeah.
And so this didn't work. That's a disappointment. This might work, right? And eventually, as you're out there and you're learning and you're listening, and you start to trust yourself more. So I trust myself a lot more now. Sure. I've turned down ideas. I don't chase as many little things now because I know it's not going to be fun, and I'm going to hate it anyway. And eventually, you hit on something that could be something big. Sure. And then, what I'm learning now or trying to learn, is how to pursue it, and not short circuit it and get scared and just take something safe. And so in the end, entrepreneurship, I guess, is what I've learned over the last 10 years. Just waking up every day and figuring it out. Things that you just were talking about regarding that element of discovering how to be an entrepreneur when you really may not. It sounds like all throughout you were
looking for security and looking for a certain dollar amount or career amount, and looking for the certainty and the security that comes with that, because then that would be your value. That would be what you're worth.
A lot of it comes from parents, right? I've read a lot. Malcolm Gladwell is a great author, and I love his statistical-based writing. And he had a couple things on parenting. The most important thing you can do as a parent is put your kids in front of people of influence. Because then they know when they have a problem or an issue, they'll be comfortable talking to somebody of influence to get them through that problem. Parents from poorer communities, they're scared of people of influence, and so they never put their kids in front of people of influence. So when a hurdle hits them, they just throw their hands up. Can't do anything. Instead of, well, I'm just going to go to the top here and try to figure out a way. And a lot of it is, so my dad was a plant manager, and so I would go to the plant, and he had his office, and he had a secretary, right, and he had a salary. And so to me, that's success. The corner office, the plant manager, that's success. Not the business owner, because my dad wasn't a business owner. And my mom was a small business owner, but she always struggled at it. But that was my image of success.
That paradigm,
right? So getting away from that these last 10 years and learning a different, that it isn't all about the salary and, the set amount of money, and maybe next year you'll get 3% more or 5% more, or maybe you can just go out and, figure your own way. I've actually, as time has gone on over these last 10 years, I've come to enjoy that part of it. So that's a lot of it. So now when I talk to people, I ask them what their dad did for a living, because you really, you start to see the patterns that you really do learn by watching your parents. It's not so much what parents say, it's what they do. The kids watch what they do. And I've tried to think about that as my kids are watching me.
There's definitely, my dad was a maintenance electrician. He worked in factories and his entire life. My mom, helped out by working the school system, lunch lady, and that type of thing. And very much so. So when I moved into the role of entrepreneurial business owner, it was uncharted territory. I had constantly self-doubts, constantly. It was unpaved. It was pioneering. It was unpaved territory. One of the things I want to kind of wrap up a little bit here with is going back to what you talked earlier about Fred Van Vliet's clothing line, named Bet on Yourself, right? And you talked about that the story behind it is that Fred bet on himself and to go to the NBA, and that's at least the part of the story that you're aware of regarding that. And then you talked about how for you betting on yourself, and what I'm hearing you say is that it's learning how to know what to say no to, and then giving you opportunity for the right things to say yes to. And so tell us a little bit about that piece as we get ready to wrap up, because that's the last stage of the hero's journey, is that what we learn about in the darkness as we're recreating ourselves, right? That we bring those gifts back into reorder. And you said earlier about essentially, how do I bet on myself regarding things?
So I felt trapped 3 times in my life. So I recognize it now. I felt trapped the last 4 years I was at the newspaper. I didn't feel like I had the skills to go do something else. My kids were in Rockford, and they weren't going to go with me, so I couldn't leave and go just find a paper in a more vibrant community that might not be dying as quickly. And so I just put up with a lot of stuff to just hang on by my fingernails, right? So that was trap number 1. But actually, that was trap number 2, because I felt like I was trapped in a bad marriage. I couldn't...
Especially when she had checked out.
She had checked out, and I didn't want to lose the time with my kids. So how do I... So I felt trapped in both those situations. And in this last year, with the company I was working with, I found out that they weren't growing. It wasn't going to ever be a great, huge company in multiple cities, and the amount of money I was making there was was not going to go up. So I felt trapped again. So do I got to start going out and just making more money on the side, which is always a limited. You run out of hours. And then I had funny thing. So I was having breakfast with you, and we were talking about your Shatter Our Silence, and we were meeting with Lynn Gibson, a former Hononegah superintendent, who I'd known for. I did a story on 20 years ago, and. After you left, we started talking, and she asked the question. She goes, "You like what you do?" So I like it, but I don't love it. And I started talking about a project I'd done 4 years before for Rockford School District, and I was like, "That was a cool project." And I had looked up prominent graduates for a marketing campaign, and I was like, I just feel like we've shot too low, and that because after we found enough people, we stopped, but. That should have been the beginning of an alumni research and development project.
Sure.
Because if you look at it, Rockford graduates 1,500 kids a year. If you look over the last 50 years, people aged 19 to 69, that's 75,000 Rockford public school graduates across the world that they've never systematically tried to find and reach out to. And the tools are easier than ever. You've got LinkedIn, you've got Facebook, you've got Google. I mean, it's just a matter of having somebody sit down and do the work. And so as I was telling her, she said to me at the end, she goes, if I was still superintendent, I'd hire you. She goes, why are you messing around with this other job? Why not just do that? It's like, that would be fun. That would just be a lot of fun. But, some people are just wired for different things. I just think it's fun to look up stuff about old people and just get them back involved. Like over the weekend, I got an email from the district. A lady named Joan Phillips out of Florida. Her dad died, Joe Las Casas. This guy apparently was, he told her he was a cross country runner at West in the 50s, but they had no clips on him. So I got done Friday night from umpiring, and then instead of going out, I headed home, got online, and found clips to find out he was a conference track champion. And he set a record at West and I sent all this stuff to Joan Phillips, and now me and Joan Phillips are friends.
Sure. Right.
But that's just, I like that kind of stuff. So anyway, so I emailed the district directly, and they were excited. They brought me in for a meeting, and now I'm in that waiting game. Right. So it's the waiting game of, do I wait for that opportunity to develop, or do I take something else? Now, I've interviewed at a couple other places, but what it's allowed me to finally do is I kind of know what I want to do long term. And so now I'm not on Indeed saying I could do that job, I could do that job, I could do that job. Now I'm looking like, I could do that job, but I don't want to do that job, or I don't want to work there. That and I'm being very picky about what my opportunities are, because I don't want to abandon what I think my true path is.
Right. Well, a couple things as you were just sharing that piece is Joseph Campbell talks about this idea of following your bliss, and we all the time talk about what is that? What is your bliss? And I think it's another way of, it could be that thing that you're interested in, that thing that you're curious about, the thing that you would do even if you don't get paid, even on those Friday nights instead of going out, and you'll do right, because of the sheer wanting to share it with someone else, and it just ends up being a friendship, a connection, whatever it may be. And so maybe, I guess, as I'm hearing you say, that if that is what it feels like to you, right, then that direction is betting on yourself. That direction that's your thing. Where it ends up being maybe less relevant than the fact of that idea, that project, that moving in that direction. As Lynn said, if she was working as a superintendent, and as we know, she's pretty well connected in the educational system, at least around here, it'll land where it's supposed to land. Maybe very well this one. It's less about the outcome. It's more about continue to stay faithful to the journey. And again, you learn things over the years. So the last 3 years, I've been running a thing called 1 Million Cups, which it's small business owners and coming in every Wednesday and talking about their journey, right? That's a big part of it. And just learning and sitting there and listening about all the different paths that people take to get there. So this time,
I'm not. If the things don't happen with one, District 1,
Yeah.
there's thousands of public school districts.
Yep.
So District 2, 3, 4, 5,
Yeah.
6, 7, 8, 9. So there's lots of opportunity, and that comes from learning at 1 million cups, because a lot of people fail 3, 4, 5, 6 times before they land upon the right idea.
Yeah.
So I look over the last 10 years. I've had a few things that I don't consider my last gig a failure at all, because I learned so much, and it got me 3 more years of spending a lot of time with my daughters.
Yeah.
And just because it didn't become my last thing doesn't mean it's a failure. Instead, I learned a ton there about there's just so many different ways to build a sustainable business, and you just have to have the willingness to fail. Because 4 years ago, 5 years ago, when the newspaper went away, it took me 2 years to get back on my feet, and I started running out of money. And then, so the first thing that happened in April, when my big contract ended, was I panicked, right? And okay, maybe I'll do a route sales job. Something to just pay money, right? But then I started to do the math. It's like, well, wait a minute. I'm not really unemployed. I'm just employed doing other things. I mean, right now I can still grind out $30,000 a year just umpiring, sub-teaching, and doing all my basketball stuff.
Yeah.
So okay, I'm not out of money, so that I can last on this for a year and a half, while I try to build this other thing. And if some other opportunity comes along, because this interview last week was with the Hendricks Foundation, that would be a great job, and I would really be good at it. So, but I don't have to rush out and go do whatever. Right? I can wait. I know I have the skills, and I recognize the opportunity. So now it's just a matter of not abandoning it out of fear. Because in the end, that's it, right? Fear. Right? And this time, I'm not going to let fear dictate my movements. And maybe it took me 50 years to do it. Some people, it doesn't take nearly that long, but in my case, it took 50.
Well, and unfortunately, because of how it works and how we learn, we have the benefit of learning vicariously at times, but many times, our stories, just like the movies, just like stories that we continue to retell, it's when we go into that disorder, when we go into that chaos and into that dark night of the soul, is where we actually learn and are challenged to learn about ourselves. So as you get ready to wrap up, Alex, I so appreciate you being on here, because this is exactly what I want the journey to be about, is talking about how do individuals recreate themselves, how do individuals persevere on the journey, and being aware of the journey, and be aware of where they're at themselves and the things that they have to face. But if there's anything that you would want to leave with, what would be something you'd want to?
When you're angry, trace it back to why you're angry. What are you afraid of? So that's what I've learned. When I'm upset and I'm losing it, it's because I'm afraid of something. And what is it from your childhood or whatever that you're afraid of? Is it you're afraid of that you're unlovable, right? Or that you're not good enough? Because that in the end, that you'll catch yourself a lot of times. Because once you've figured out what you're afraid of, then you can deal with it.
Perfect. Alex, thank you. As we're wrapping up today on the journey, I just wanted to, for anyone's listening, this story that Alex was telling us today about recreating himself, and he didn't ask to get thrown into the darkness at all, right? At all. But very much it was about what did he do while he was there, and what did he learn about himself, and unpacking some of the things from earlier time periods and those impressions, and then some of the lies that he was believing. And then most importantly, he had some protective factors that he was aware of, and that he wasn't going to succumb to the darkness. So Alex, very much I appreciate you being here and being open with your journey and what you've learned about yourself. Thank you very much for being with us today, and look forward to being with you next week.